Woke. Censorship. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. It is undeniable that society has a long history of bigotry, sexism, racism, discrimination, homophobia, and other isms besides. In humanity's past, most people have not been treated fairly, equally, or it might be argued even humanely. There have always been certain groups of people who maintain superiority to others by reason of sex, religion, ethnicity, family name, and so forth. This perceived superiority by groups in power has frequently justified their maltreatment of other minority and or disempowered groups. It's easy to treat others as less than equals if you believe they are inferior. And indeed, of course, much of the root cause of this has been as a consequence of my kind, for we regard others as inferior to us, and thus we are the true believers behind so many of the diktats and doctrines that have led to the oppression of human beings throughout history. Many people, especially young people, now have a heightened awareness of this troubled past and have sought to correct these collective wrongs. This is where the term woke has come into play. It is defined as aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. Given that we, as a humanity, have a long history of racial and social injustice, it at first blush might be considered that being woke to these problems is a good thing. After all, how can you address a problem without first being aware of it? As I invariably teach those of you that come to me in consultation, you need to understand and recognize what it is that you're dealing with in terms of your ensnarement with the narcissist, and to know and understand yourself before you can then take the corrective steps to free yourself of the shackles of narcissistic ensnarement. People who are woke then have a tendency to call out or cancel those they perceive not to be woke or woke enough. Cancelling someone occurs when one person says or does something to which others who are woke object, and then that person finds themselves being shamed and criticised, usually on social media. This can result in the ruination of a person's reputation, and that individual may find themselves losing their livelihood, losing supporters and followers, having contracts cancelled, losing out on auditions and concerts and so forth, so that it causes them a very significant problem in their lives. In 2019, in an interview for the Obama Foundation on Youth Activism, President Obama expressed strong concerns about wokeism and the cancel culture that was emerging. He said, "This idea of purity, and you're never compromised, and you're always politically woke and all of that, you need to get over it quickly, because the world is messy. There are ambiguities. People who do really good stuff have flaws. People who you are fighting may love their kids and share certain things with you." Amongst those that identify as woke, there is a vocal minority who utilize the concept of wokeism as a means of achieving the prime aims of the narcissist. It is they, driven by a sanctimonious, self-righteous view that they are somehow on the side of good and that they are morally correct, which therefore allows them to judge others, and that they are, without restraint, without condition, are absolutely entitled to silence others. They exhibit their hypocrisy by declaring that they are allowed to speak their truth by reason of freedom of speech, but you are denied any opportunity to express your view or opinion because it fails to accord with their views. A contrary view cannot be allowed. Why? because subconsciously it amounts to a threat to control. And therefore, that woke individual's narcissism causes them to reject your contrary view in order to nullify the threat to control by labeling it as wrong, racist, a hate-filled observation, that you are a misogynist or a hater. This group have gone forward through their sense of entitlement, lack of accountability by having no intellectual rigour, to have decided that there is such a concept that their feelings become facts. This is wholly inaccurate. They operate on the basis that if you offend them, you become a morally reprehensible individual who therefore is fair game to be castigated, chastised, silenced, and punished. In other words, your view threatens their sense of control, and because they are on the side of right, they are justified and entitled in nullifying that threat to control by castigating you, chastising you, silencing you, and punishing you, i.e. manipulating you into compliance. This group is populated by narcissists, who are the true believers of wokeism. This isn't to say that all narcissists are on the side of woke. Of course not. Narcissists are found of every political persuasion. But this group of true believers in wokeism subconsciously use a false moral standpoint to control others, i.e. the assertion of control or nullification of a threat to control, to draw reactions from them, namely fuel, to manage a facade, to monetize their supposed woke goodness, to access particular networks, all of which are residual benefits. Driven by their sense of entitlement to speak their truth, operating without accountability for their judgments, functioning without emotional empathy for the views, lives and needs of other individuals that they deem to be contrary to their stance, acting with a haughty judgment of others, and banding around a facade of moral righteousness, the concept of wokedom has been seized upon and driven by so many narcissists. Naturally, not all of those that espouse a woke view are narcissist. There are normals and even empaths who are caught up in the herd mentality by the leadership of these true believers. The wokeists act without restraint and through a perpetuating belief that they are good and that you, by virtue of a contrary standpoint, are bad. The typical black and white thinking. But owing to their black and white thinking, they fail to recognise the many failings in their behaviours. And here are just a few examples. That labelling someone as a racist doesn't actually tell that person in what they've done that was offensive. It's a blanket response. It doesn't explain what ought to be done to change that behaviour. And indeed, there is nothing often to change. It is simply the use of that label to snuff out the threat to control that is posed. Similarly, if a person finds themselves cancelled for a perceived transgression, how can they seek any redemption of the position when their status has been cancelled, their platform has been removed from them? The wokeists surely would want people to come round to their way of thinking, but how can they do so when they've been bullied into silence? The fact is that calling someone a racist or a similar label is offensive in itself. It's done without due regard for the evidence. And therefore, what these wokeists do is cause people to be recipients of these labels to then think, you're labelling me without actually understanding me. And therefore, that individual, quite understandably, is not going to listen to any argument put forward by a wokeist, assuming that even they have a decent argument, and some of them may well do. Instead, by immediately labelling someone and immediately judging them, that individual is left thinking, I have been judged. I have not been given the opportunity to explain myself. Therefore, why on earth should I listen to what you have to say? Those individuals are going to respond with anger, resentment, hurt and hostility. The fear that is generated as a consequence of being called out and labelled and cancelled restricts free speech and honest differences of opinion. It means that people become frightened to voice their concerns because they fear being singled out and there being a social media pylon. They fear voicing a legitimate opinion, which they are perfectly entitled to do, and often ones which are well formed based upon evidence, because they will be shouted down, labelled, castigated as belonging to a group that deserves to be cancelled. In effect, this means that the wokists start to become a thought police. This represents an Orwellian future where freedom of expression becomes extremely restricted, that the wokists are allowed to express their views, but anybody else that has a contrary view is not allowed. The use of the woke movement by narcissists and their blinded non-narcissist followers is resulting in censorship and a brutal attack on free speech. You are being told what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot say, and ultimately, this is leading to a policing of your thoughts. Ask yourself, when you have felt moved to express an opinion to a friend, in a debate, or often on social media, have you felt the need to check yourself in terms of what you might say? If so, your thoughts are being policed already. A majority, of course, do not actually accept this, but find themselves being cowed into submissive silence too often by the vocal minority of these woke narcissists. And the fear of being labelled, stigmatised and cancelled means that whilst there is a silent majority who all agree that what the wokists are saying is nonsensical, they dare not say it. The assault against this has already begun across so much of our civilization and society. The rewriting of history, propagated in schools and colleges, the changing of names and labels, the removing of statues, and the altering of language. Just for example, only recently, the pop star Sam Smith referred to a fisher them, altering the English language. There is no need for it, but it is done with a righteousness behind it, and that if you were to criticise Mr. Smith for using such a term, you can expect a howling mob to descend upon you, explaining that you are prejudiced, that you are a bigot. No, you're merely defending the proper use of the English language. And the English language, or any language of course, is now being attacked through wokeism and a form of censorship that it utilises. Withholding information is the essence of tyranny. Control of the flow of information is the tool of the dictatorship. So said Bruce Coville. Benjamin Franklin also stated, if all printers were determined not to print anything till they were sure it would offend nobody, there would be very little printed. And Benjamin Franklin's words have greater resonance than ever before as a consequence of the recent attacks upon the works of authors. J.K. Rowling has expressed certain views in support of women, which has led to the disgraceful response of certain once-child actors turning against her who owe their entire living and fame to her brilliant works, where people have sought to cancel and ban her work because she's expressed an opinion. And just because they don't like it, they think that they are perfectly entitled to issue a call to action, a call to arms to say, ban J.K. Rowling, cancel her, silence her, don't buy the latest game, Hogwarts Legacy. There's even an individual that has gone back and sought to change the covers of the books. How dare this individual enter into a censorship of the works of somebody who created a world that has given so much pleasure and enjoyment to millions, tens of millions of people around the globe. But this individual, as a wokist, censors that work. How dare they do so? They offer nothing but their censorship of the work of another. We've seen the outrageous conduct of the publishers Puffin with regard to the works of Roald Dahl, which I spoke about in a recent video. But ask yourself, how far will these individuals go, driven by their narcissist need to assert control and draw fuel? This small group that are making these decisions in offices away from scrutiny. in bunkers, unseen by the majority who have always enjoyed these works, who are becoming cowed into silence through fear of speaking out. How far might they go? Already they're seeking to damage and displace the works of Roald Dahl. But imagine where they could go to next. There'll be those of you that are familiar with Noddy. What about if the books became this way? It was a beautiful day, and Noddy had gone to visit his best friend, a bearded gnome who lived in a toadstool house. "Hello, Big Ears," said Noddy. "How dare you call me that?" gasped the gnome. "There is nothing wrong with the size of my ears, and it's extremely hurtful of you to draw attention to them in this cruel and insensitive manner. What a horrid little bully." "How dare you call me little?" gasped Noddy. "It's extremely hurtful of you to draw attention to my height in this cruel and insensitive manner. What a nasty old man." "How dare you call me old?" gasped the gnome. "That's blatant ageism. Right, that's it. I'm never speaking to you again." Many of you will be familiar with the very hungry caterpillar, perhaps one of the first books that you ever had involvement with. On Saturday, the caterpillar ate through one slice of cheesecake, one hamburger, one portion of chips, one BLT sandwich, one chocolate eclair, one pork pie, one bag of jelly babies, one packet of crisps, one pot noodle, and one deep-fried Mars bar. That night, he felt sick, and all because of the hateful body shaming that remains rife in our shockingly fat-phobic culture. The next day, thankfully, he realised that he was actually a perfectly normal and healthy size for a caterpillar, and found the strength and courage to resist the pressure we cruelly place on caterpillars to transform themselves into beautiful butterflies, because he had realised he was already beautiful, just the way he was. Many of you in your childhood will have enjoyed Roger Hargreaves' books about the Mr. Men. Well, why don't we wokeify Mr. Tickle? That afternoon, Mr. Tickle tickled everybody. He tickled the dentist, he tickled the farmer, he tickled the baker, he tickled the teacher, he tickled the whole town. And that is why, after years of touching people inappropriately, without their consent and a flagrant violation of their personal boundaries, Mr. Tickle has quite rightly been cancelled. How about the Gruffalo being revised? "I say, little mousie, would you care to come and have lunch in my Weasley lair? That's a thoughtful offer, Weasel, but no, I've got a date with a Gruffalo." "A Gruffalo? What on earth do you mean? The most hideous beast the world's ever seen. It has hideous fangs and hideous feet, and its hideous breath stinks of rotting meat." "Hey," said the Gruffalo, "that's not nice. I've never said anything mean about mice. What's wrong with my teeth, I'd like to know, or my feet or my breath? This is really low. It hurts me when animals see me and scream. No wonder we monsters have low self-esteem. You shouldn't judge somebody based on their looks. I'm glad they're rewriting these horrible books." And then finally, how about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone? "There's something you need to understand, Harry," said Hagrid gravely. "Dark forces are on the rise. They will stop at nothing to achieve their wicked aims, and they are led by the most terrifying, cold-hearted and downright evil villain that ever walked the earth." "Voldemort?" asked Harry. "Far worse than that," said Hagrid. "It's J.K. Rowling." Those are just, of course, a tongue-in-cheek envisagement of the way that the wokists might get hold of those beloved books. But it's already started. And it is the narcissists that are at the core of wokeism, utilising it as a method to achieve the prime aims that is resulting in this censorship. The right, of course, censors, but invariably it does so in a more obvious manner, that these simply are texts which ought not to be allowed. And they do so, saying you're not allowed to read them because they're viewed as being subversive. They make it clear that it's about maintaining control over you. The wokists are far more invidious and insidious in the way that they go about this. They do so under the auspices of, this is all about doing the right thing, and that we care, and that it's all about ensuring that the appropriate standards are upheld. But as I've demonstrated to you, it is but a method of pursuing the prime aims. And censorship is on the rise and is one of the means of doing it. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.